Disclaimer: this content is for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought a simple dare from my husband would lead me here. It started off as a playful challenge, something silly between us, a moment of fun in an otherwise ordinary evening. But now, standing at this crossroads, my heart is pounding, and I can't shake the feeling that everything is about to change. We've always had that kind of relationship, full of jokes, dares, and harmless bets. It keeps things interesting after years of marriage. So, when he smirked at me over dinner and said, "I dare you to do it," I laughed, thinking it was just another game. But the way he looked at me, expectant, almost daring me to back down, made me pause. He knew I hated losing, and maybe that's why I said yes. At first, it seemed harmless, just a bit of fun, right? But as the minutes passed, doubt crept in. Was this really just a playful challenge, or was there something more behind it? I glanced at him, searching his face for a sign. Was he testing me, pushing boundaries, or was this his way of revealing something deeper about us? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My mind raced with questions. What if this changes how I see him, how he sees me? What if I can't go through with it? Or worse, what if I do and I regret it? And that's when I realized this wasn't just about a dare. This was about trust, about pushing limits, about discovering something unexpected about each other, maybe even about myself. But now, as I stand on the edge of this decision, my stomach twists. Do I take the risk? Or do I walk away and pretend this never happened? What would you do? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been dared to do something that completely changed your perspective? Would you take the challenge, or would you hesitate like I am right now? Vote in the poll, drop your thoughts below, and let's talk about it. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is far from over. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the edge of the table. My husband's eyes stayed locked on mine, that same teasing smirk playing on his lips. He knew me too well. He knew I hated backing down. But this time felt different. "Come on," he said, tilting his head slightly. "You always say you're up for a challenge." I forced a chuckle, trying to mask the knot forming in my stomach. "Yeah, but not this kind of challenge." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, just watching me. He wasn't pushing, not exactly. But the way he sat there, waiting, made it clear. He was curious, curious to see what I would do, curious to see if I would actually go through with it. And that's what scared me the most. See, our marriage had always been built on playful dares and little bets. "I bet you can't stay off your phone for a whole day." "I dare you to sing in front of everyone at the party." "Let's see who can stay awake the longest during the horror movie." It was our thing. It kept us laughing, kept things exciting. But this was different. I looked away, pretending to check my phone, but my mind was racing. Was he testing me? Trying to prove something? Or was this just another one of our games, and I was the one making it bigger than it needed to be? He reached for his drink, taking a slow sip before setting it down. "You don't have to," he said finally, his voice calm, almost indifferent. But there was something else in his tone, a challenge, a hidden meaning, or was I just overthinking everything? I hated how much this was getting under my skin. "Why did you even dare me to do this?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay casual. He shrugged, but there was a flicker of something in his expression. Amusement? Expectation? "I just thought it would be interesting." Interesting? The word lingered between us, heavy, unsettling. I glanced at him again, really studying his face now. I had always thought I knew him better than anyone. But in this moment, sitting across from him, I realized something. There was a part of him I didn't recognize, and that terrified me. What would you do in my place? Let me know in the comments. Would you take the dare or would you walk away? Let's talk about it. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. The silence between us stretched longer than it should have. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant sound of a car passing by outside, but all I could focus on was him, his calm, steady gaze, the way his fingers traced lazy circles on the rim of his glass. I knew I should say something, make a joke, change the subject, but I didn't, because the truth was, I wasn't just questioning the dare anymore, I was questioning him. What if I say no? I finally asked. My voice came out softer than I intended, almost unsure. His lips twitched, like he'd been expecting that. Then you say no. That was it. No pushback, no teasing, just a simple answer. And somehow, that unsettled me even more. I wanted him to laugh it off, to tell me it was just a joke, that I was overthinking everything. But he didn't. He just sat there, waiting. And for the first time in our marriage, I had this strange feeling, like I was standing on one side of a line and he was on the other. Like this wasn't just about a dare anymore. Why does it feel like there's more to this? I asked, trying to read his expression. He hesitated for just a second, so fast I almost missed it. Then he shook his head, smiling like I was imagining things. It's just a game, he said. You don't have to do it. But his voice was too smooth, too easy. And that hesitation? It wasn't nothing. I wanted to let it go, to laugh and move on. But I couldn't, because deep down, something told me if I ignored this, I'd regret it. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the conversation over and over. The way he looked at me, the way he didn't look at me, the way he acted like it didn't matter when, somehow, I knew it did. Had I missed something? Had there been signs before? Had I been so caught up in the day-to-day that I hadn't noticed a shift between us? Or worse, was this the moment everything changed? The next morning, I decided I couldn't let it go. I had to understand why he dared me to do this, what it meant. So I did something I'd never done before. I tested him. I brought up the dare again, casually, like it was no big deal. Like I wasn't trying to read between every word he said. And when I told him I was thinking about going through with it, I watched his face carefully. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look relieved. He looked intrigued. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a game to him. This was something more. What do you think is really going on here? Drop your predictions in the comments. I want to hear your theories. And trust me, the next part, you won't see it coming. The moment I said I was thinking about going through with the dare, something shifted in the air between us. It was subtle, but I felt it. My husband's expression didn't change much. He still had that calm, unreadable look, but there was something in his eyes, something just beneath the surface. Curiosity, amusement, or was it something else entirely? Really, he said, his voice smooth, controlled. I nodded slowly, watching him. Yeah, why not? He tilted his head slightly, studying me. No reason, he said, too casually. I just didn't think you would. That response hit me in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't what he said, but how he said it. Like he had already decided what I would do. Like he knew me better than I knew myself. And maybe that was true. I tried to act like it didn't bother me, but I could feel my pulse quicken. Well, I said, forcing a little shrug, maybe you don't know everything about me. That made him smile. Maybe. His gaze lingered on me for a second too long before he stood up and walked to the kitchen. I sat there, gripping my glass, my mind racing. I had expected him to push back, to challenge me further, but he didn't. And somehow, that made me even more uneasy. Later that night, I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Something about it didn't sit right with me. This whole thing felt different, like I was being pulled into something, and I wasn't sure if I was the one in control. I couldn't help but wonder, had this been his plan all along? Was this just another game between us? Or was there something I wasn't seeing? The next day, I decided to push things further. I told him I had made up my mind. I was definitely going to do it. His reaction? A small smirk, a slight nod. No surprise, no hesitation. It was almost like he had expected me to say that, like this was playing out exactly the way he wanted. And that's when the realization hit me. This was never just a dare. It was something else, something much bigger. But by the time I understood that, I was already too deep to turn back. What do you think happens next? Drop your theories in the comments. I want to hear your take on this. And trust me, the next part, it's about to get intense. The moment I realized this was never just a dare, something inside me shifted. It was like a trap had been set without me noticing, and somehow I had walked right into it. I wasn't sure how or why, but I knew one thing. My husband wanted me to go through with it, and that scared me more than anything. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while he slept beside me. His breathing was steady, his face calm, like nothing had changed. But for me, everything felt different. The weight of the dare, the way he reacted, or rather, the way he didn't react, it all kept replaying in my mind. Why did he seem so confident? Almost too confident? I turned onto my side, studying him in the dim light. Was this all a mind game? A test? Or was there something I hadn't figured out yet? The next morning, I decided I couldn't just let it play out the way he expected. I needed to do something unexpected. So I told him I had changed my mind. I expected a reaction, surprise, disappointment, maybe even a playful challenge. But all he did was nod, sipping his coffee like it didn't matter at all. Okay, he said simply. And that's when I knew something was off. Because if he truly didn't care, why was he acting like he already knew what I would do next? The rest of the day, I watched him carefully, looking for a clue, a slip-up, something to explain why he was so calm about all of this. And then, just when I started to think I was imagining it, I found it. His phone was sitting on the kitchen counter, unlocked. He rarely left it unattended, so I hesitated. I wasn't the type to go through his things, but something told me I needed to, and that's when I saw it. A message from someone I didn't recognize. She's taking the bait. I told you she would. My stomach dropped. My fingers hovered over the screen, my mind racing. Who was this? What were they talking about? Before I could process it, I heard footsteps behind me. My husband's voice, calm as ever. Something interesting? I turned slowly, my heart pounding. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I realized he had wanted me to see that message. This wasn't just a dare. It was something else, something I wasn't prepared for. But it was too late now. I was already part of it. What would you do in my situation? Let me know in the comments. I need to hear your thoughts on this. And trust me, you won't believe what happens next. My heart pounded as I stood frozen, his phone still in my hand. The message on the screen burned into my mind. She's taking the bait. I told you she would. I looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of guilt, of hesitation, of anything that would tell me what was really going on. But he just stood there, completely calm, watching me. I swallowed hard. Who is this from? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head slightly, like he was amused by the question. Does it matter? His response sent a chill through me. Yes, it matters, I said, gripping the phone tighter. You dared me to do something, and now I find out there's someone else watching this? What's going on? He sighed like he was disappointed, but not surprised. like he had expected me to reach this moment. Then, without warning, he stepped forward and took the phone from my hand effortlessly, locking the screen with a single tap. I was hoping you wouldn't find that, he admitted, slipping the phone into his pocket. But I guess I underestimated you. My stomach twisted. So it was a setup. A pause. Then he nodded. I took a step back. Why? What was the point of all this? He exhaled, rubbing his jaw like he was debating how much to say. And then he finally answered, because I needed to know if I could trust you. I blinked. Trust me? He nodded. There's something I've been working on, something I can't talk about yet. But before I let you in on it, I had to be sure. Sure of what? That I'd follow through with some ridiculous dare? That I'd be predictable? That I'd obey without question? I don't understand, I said, shaking my head. So this was all a test? He hesitated, then gave me the smallest nod. Anger bubbled up inside me. That's not how trust works, I said, my voice sharp now. You don't manipulate someone just to see how they'll react. For the first time, his expression faltered. I had my reasons, he said, and you did exactly what I thought you would. I stared at him, realization hitting me like a wave. You wanted me to say yes, then change my mind. You wanted me to go through your phone. His silence was my answer. I felt sick. Who was that message from? I demanded. He sighed again. You'll find out soon enough. That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just a cryptic response that left me more confused than before. But one thing was clear. I didn't know my husband as well as I thought. And whatever he was involved in, I had just stepped right into the middle of it. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. And trust me, this story isn't over yet. I stood there, my heart still racing, waiting for some kind of explanation, something that would make this all make sense. But my husband just stared back at me, unreadable, like he had already decided he wasn't going to tell me anything more. And that was the moment I realized I didn't need his answers, because no matter what he said now, the damage was already done. The man I thought I knew, the one I had trusted, had been testing me, manipulating me, watching me like I was some kind of experiment. And the worst part? I had fallen for it step by step, exactly the way he had predicted. A knot tightened in my stomach. I don't know what you're hiding, I said quietly, but I'm done playing your games. His expression didn't change. If anything, he looked impressed. Fair enough, he said simply. But remember, sometimes